Welcome to the HTH Church podcast. We are a church in the heart of Hastings whose desire is to build communities of people who are so passionate about being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and joining in with what Jesus is doing, that lives, families, and communities are changed and transformed one at a time. On this podcast, you can keep up to date with the latest talks from our Sunday services, as well as additional bonus episodes which include conversations, interviews, devotions, and much more. If you'd like to find out more about the church, you can visit our website, hthchurch.org. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy this episode.
My name's Darren. For those that don't know, I'm from Hastings. I'm one of those born and bred Hastings people. Any other born and bred Hastings people? Yeah, a few of you. That's what we like to see. Like everyone else. Love everyone else. Don't worry about it. But and great seeing you all here this morning. Great to see the church full of people worshiping Jesus right here in the heart of Hastings. It's always so exciting to see that. A little bit about me. I started a marketing business about a year ago, still learning lots, making lots of mistakes along that road and trying to learn lots of new things. I've been a bit obsessed with the BBC series The Traitors. No spoilers, apart from the winner. No spoilers. Any other fans here? Any other fans? Anyone else been watching? Anyone else not really understand the hype around The Traitors? Yeah, that's a classic traitor move, that, for those that put their hand up. One of the things that's been fascinating for those that don't know, as I've been watching The Traitors, is it's based around, the main part of it is around a round table where all of the players come together and there's a discussion to try and work out who are the secret traitors amongst them and who are the faithfuls. And quite often, it destroys friendships, even just for a little while. Everyone says it's a game, but when you're in there and you're being told that you're a traitor, it suddenly changes quite a bit. And people that go from a place of being friends and being people that trust each other, suddenly they can leave that place after conversations in a very different place. They leave that round table quite often confused, and it's a place of disunity. Whereas today we're going to look at a conversation that some people had with Jesus, which is the opposite. Rather than confusion and disunity, it brought clarity and collaboration. If you've got your Bibles, I'd love for you to turn to John chapter 2, and we're going to read verses 1 to 12, a story that we have probably heard of before or at least know a little bit about. It'll also come up on the screen. And it's the story of Jesus turning water into wine at the wedding in Cana. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, disaster, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 80 to 120 liters. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and the disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. We're going to look at this story through 2 different people's eyes this morning. The first one is this whole idea of how this story, this conversation with Jesus, brings clarity to the situation. And I don't know about you, but there are times in life where I sometimes feel a bit lost. And that's okay. Where sometimes something hasn't gone according to plan, where a situation which you have put your hope in doesn't work out the way that you want it to do. Sometimes that's a small thing, like, Tesco's not having the right tea bags that you want that day. Sometimes it might feel not as important as much as that's important. It might be much bigger than that. It might be a situation that you go through, grief, loss, relationship breakup. It might be a case of losing a job, being made redundant. There's so many things that we go through. And quite often, if you're like me, it can leave you in a place of feeling a little bit lost. My go-to when I feel a bit lost is I quite often need to go and take a walk or take some time, and my go-to tends to be the beach. I go and sit on the beach for a little while, and I just take some time talking to God. I just take some time to process it, to look out to sea, to be aware of something that is bigger than me. And I was asking God after one of these situations where I was feeling a bit lost, God, can you speak to me? I just need something from you. I need to know that you care. I need to know that you're there. And this question came into my head, which was, who am I? As if God was asking me, who am I? And my first response was like, oh, okay, like that felt quite significant. Was that from God? Was that my own thoughts? The classic human thing. And then I started thinking, okay, who are you, God? And I started saying, God, you're my father. You love me. You're an unconditional, loving father. You're amazing. You're a good God. Even though I don't understand what's going on, you're my friend. You're going to walk with me through this. All of the things that we believe and all of the things that we're taught and we understand. And then it felt like God just going again, yes, but who am I? And I was like, well, God, you're like my shepherd. You're the one that when I'm lost, you're the one that I'm a bit like a sheep sometimes and I wander off. Yes, yeah, okay, but who am I? And suddenly the question flipped to who am I without you? As in God saying, who am I without you, Darren? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, you're the Alpha and Omega. You're the beginning, you're the end. You're the Almighty God that spoke planets and stars and universe into being. This sea that I'm staring out at, you're the one that created this. And what happened, it flipped my perspective to being me-centric, of this is who God is to me, which is all right and it's all great, to this is who God is despite me. This is who God is before I was born, before my parents and grandparents were born. This is who God has always been. And for that situation that I was in, I needed to know that. I needed to know that I wasn't the main character. It's really easy to slip into that we are the main character, that we are the ones that it's all around. The world revolves around us, because we're told that quite often. But there was something beautiful about stepping out of that place of actually, this isn't my story, it's God's story. And I am really important to him. And I'm really important to, just as we all are, really important to his story and his mission, but it's not us-centric, it is God-centric. And that's what happens here with Mary. Mary, through the conversation she has with Jesus, suddenly finds a new clarity. She would know Jesus pretty flipping well. Mums know their kids pretty flipping well, okay? They know their kids. And when she asks Jesus, she sees a need. There's nothing wrong with it. And actually, I think the empathy that Mary feels is amazing. Empathy knows what it's like to be an outcast in society. And that is exactly what would have happened for this wedding. It was not just they've run out of wine, they sort of like a few bottles, not enough of Merlot. What actually happened in this situation was the cultural significance, was that there'd be shame brought on that couple because they hadn't provided the hospitality that was needed in a really important celebration. It would have stayed with them. And Mary would have understood that because when she bore Jesus, when she was pregnant with Jesus, there was so many questions. So many unanswered questions around her pregnancy. Things that people would have been whispering about in the street. people that she would have never even necessarily known, but they would have had questions about what was going on. She knew what it was like to have the doubt or the questions around her culturally. So her motive is totally right. And she says to Jesus, can you do something about it, basically? Like, the wine's run out. And I remember when I first read this line, woman, I was like, whoa, okay, what's the tone of this? This feels like a little bit risky. I'm not sure, it's Jesus, but you don't speak to your mum like that. But as I looked at the translation, there is, it's a sense of endearment. It's a sense of honor, this word. We don't have a word like this in English, which is a bit sad. Maybe it's something we should introduce. But it's a sense of honoring the person, but it's also a sense of separating himself slightly from that relationship that he has with Mary. Because he's just come out of this amazing, very difficult 40 days in the desert, where he's tempted, where he then goes and he's baptized. He steps into this ministry, and he's stepping out of this place from just being the son of Mary to also taking on this role or operating in this role of the Son of Man. And so there's this separation, there's this clarity for Mary that he's not just her baby anymore. That he's taking on a new responsibility. He's stepping into a new stage of his ministry. There's clarity. And Mary's response is beautiful. It's surrender. She says to the servants, just do whatever he says. It's out of my hands. I've brought it up. I'm not getting involved anymore. He's had a word with me. Let's just leave it with him. She sees the need. She asks for help. And then she surrenders. She leaves it with Jesus. And I think there's something that is a really great pattern for us to follow. When we see need, the first thing that we can do, and I think should do, is bring it to Jesus. We ask for his help. But then it takes some time for us to just go, God, I've given this to you. I'm now going to surrender it. Do whatever he tells you to do. It's really important how we think about who Jesus is. And for Mary, like I say, there was this moment of clarity about who God is. The American pastor and author A.W. Tozer says this line, and I love it. It says, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. I'll say that again. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. What comes into your mind when you think about God? What comes into your mind? Do you think about God as this authoritative figure that you're a little bit not sure about approaching because maybe, he knows too much about you and you're a bit worried about what he might say? Do you see him as a distant God who actually doesn't really care? He sort of gets involved, but it's a bit random. We're not really sure why he does this and doesn't do that. How do you see God? Because actually, just like Tozer's saying, it's one of the most important things. And the reason for that is because the way that we think about God is the way we then interact with God. And then comes the action of how we outplay that in our lives. So if we think about God in a way which is, he's an angry God, we're probably less likely to approach him when we need things. We're probably less likely to come to him with the needs and the wants and the desires in our heart. And then we're sort of a bit lost because we're like, well, does he care? Whereas if we think about God in the way of him being, again, a loving heavenly father or a shepherd or a friend or a brother or whatever it might be, we can then start to act upon that. So clarity is really important. I think this conversation that Jesus has with Mary brings fresh clarity to their relationship and the situation they're in. The second one is collaboration. Collaboration. I think that conversation with Jesus leads to collaboration. I was walking home from music practice the other day, and as I was walking along Queen's Road, I was going past Bar Moda and the cinema, just in that little bit. And I suddenly, as I came round that little corner, I noticed that there was sort of a strange carpet of white things in the road. And I was like, oh, that's a bit unusual. As I got a bit closer, I could make out their shape. They were sort of rectangular. And I thought, I wonder what's happened, what's going on. And as I got even closer, I started to notice that they were steak bakes. Hundreds of steak bakes just lying across the road. And I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe my prayer has been answered. Maybe this is the moment which I've been thinking about for ages, is like, God, can you just rain food down? I don't know whether Greg's Steak Bakes is quite similar to manna in the Bible, the nutritional value anyway. I don't know. I'm not a dietitian or even know how to say it. But it's one of those things that I was like, wow, okay, what's going on? My next thought was I saw the guy who was delivering in a massive Greg's lorry, the trolley that he was pushing along had knocked over, and that's what had happened. All of the pastries had gone all over the floor just outside the Greg's in Hastings Town Centre. My next thought was, great, this is a perfect opportunity to take a picture. That was my first thing. And I started thinking of, if I did put this on my stories on Instagram, some of the lines that I might be able to actually use. And I just wanted to test a few of these with you. We've got baking a bit of a scene. Okay, we'll get rid of that one. Hope they did a whisk assessment. You have to sort of say it in a Jonathan Ross voice, that one, and it works a bit better. I'm not very good. Donut panic. Yeah, none of these are really working out, are they? I was hoping that when I went and said to him, and chatted to him, he would say something like, it was meant to be a piece of cake. Anyway, that's the yeast of his worries. Okay, right, none of those. But as I was thinking up of these terrible puns and wanting to take a picture, there was suddenly this prompt within me of, go and help him. I was like, no, I can't. I don't need to. One, Traitors is on at 9 o'clock. I'm already late. I need to get home. The next thing was, I haven't done the training. He'd probably just say no, or he might be a bit confused. He might think I'm going to come and steal some of the half-frozen steak bakes or something. But I just kept getting this sense of go and help him. So I went up to him. One of those situations, I'm telling you this story because it's one of those situations where I actually did that thing. Normally I just don't do it, and then it's not a very good story because you never know what happens. But I went and did it, and I said to him, can I give you a hand? And he gave me a bin bag, and he was like, well, yeah, if you're okay. And we put all of these frozen baked goods in a bin bag, hoping that they're sort of disposed of rather than they carried on to the bakery for the next day. But I left him and I just said, have a good evening, as good as you can have. And that was it. But I noticed that there was a small moment where there was a situation where I could have acted in one way, and I chose to act in another way, not because of my own desire. I didn't want to do that, but there was something within me that said help. There was something where God, I believe, was inviting me to collaborate, to help somebody in a really small way, to help them out in a situation, to make their day better, and just bring a bit of joy. And the servants in this story, where Jesus turns water into wine, were invited to get involved. Jesus could have just done it. He didn't even need the water, really. He could have just clicked his fingers. He had control over creation and humanity. He didn't need to do anything with others, but he decided to use other people to be part of the miracle. What might God be doing in your life? What situations, networks, environments, families has God put you in where he might be just asking you to be part of the miracle? What are the difficult situations? The situations where there is need, situations where there is grief, where there is shame, where there is hurt in this world, that God is inviting you to be part of the solution, inviting you to be part of the miracle. Because for the servants, they could have just gone, who is this guy? What's he talking about? This is already a horrible situation. Now he's telling us to go and fill up these water jars. What's going on? But they don't. They do it, and they're obedient. And so many times we see in the Bible and the stories we hear, even today about miracles, quite often it starts with obedience. It starts with people going, I am available. I am up for getting involved. I'm going to do what I feel God is telling me to do. Because from obedience often comes breakthrough. Because through obedience, quite often, next comes miracles. And it might be in the smallest way. It might be something you think isn't that significant, but it might be a breakthrough for someone else, which is exactly what they needed in that day. And that's part of our heart as well. We're starting the first meetup of HGH Business today because just like in any setting, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's family, we want to see God's power come through businesses in this town and throughout the UK and around the world as well, because we believe that God cares about that. What are the small little changes? What are the things that are important to you that you can do which impact your culture, your company, your school, wherever it is, whichever network that you're in? I'll finish with this story. I was reading about a guy called Paddy, and Paddy was just off to work. He was a commuter, he worked in London, and Paddy one day got up as normal, went to work, had a normal day, and then was really desperate for the toilet on the way home. Really desperate. So he went towards the normal station toilet that he would use, out of order, gutted. Like, I don't know if you've been in that situation, but absolutely gutted. So he said, right, I can hold off. I'm going to hold off, and he used to stand in the same place where the train would come in each, so he would know which carriage he was getting into. So the doors open, he gets into the carriage, still busting for the toilet, goes to use the toilet in that carriage, gutted, out of order as well. Starts to move down the carriage, in the end finds a toilet that's working, and he uses it. I won't go into the details. Goes to sleep. Oh, not on the toilet, no. Hopefully not. But when he wakes up to a loud crash, and shaken, starts looking around and can see that there are people around him that are not people anymore, they're just bodies. The train crashed in Clapham. You may remember it, or you may have heard of it. It was the 1988 Clapham Junction train crash, which over 36 people died in. Hundreds of people were injured. That set Paddy on a journey of saying, why am I still alive? He sort of had a bit of an understanding of who God was. He came from a bit of a background where Christianity was a thing, but his own admission, never had a living faith, never really had a relationship with God. Paddy's married to Carol, and Paddy and Carol's daughter, 1991, had a real crisis. It was a horrible situation for the family, and that drove her to then look at faith again. Both Paddy and Carol did lots of different things, but then they made a decision after having that fresh clarity of that situation. How do we collaborate with God? And Paddy and Carol Henderson in 1997, in a little church in Salisbury, started something called Food Bank. And, oh man, I'm getting a bit emotional. Food Bank has impacted, just in 2023 to 2024, 3.12 million people, over nearly 1,700 food banks around the world. Now, that growth was not always quick, but they saw a need in their community. And because of the fresh clarity they had had from really horrible situations, and we hope that it doesn't always take that, but often those really difficult times bring fresh clarity to our lives. They then collaborated with God in the need that they could see in the community. What's in your hands? What are your skills? Where has God placed you? You don't need to start the next food bank. It's just as powerful you doing your thing that God has called you to do in your situation. And it might lead to something that is recognized as something that has impacted millions of people. But how do you be the best parent How do you best be the best grandparent? How do you be the best auntie, uncle? How do you be the best friend? What does it look like to take God into those situations where you are the only light? How do you reflect his light? And I do believe that when we have these conversations with Jesus, which just like Mary, just like the servants, just like all the people that we read through the Bible, just like all the testimonies and all the stories that we've heard since then, that when we do that, we receive fresh clarity and we can step into collaboration with God.
Thanks for tuning in to the HTH Church podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with someone you think would appreciate it? And be sure to subscribe to our channel to get notified when new episodes are published. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you have a great day.